Hello, my name is Franco Leo, and I'm delighted to have Romàn Baca with me today, Artistic Director of Exit 12 Dance Company in New York. Welcome, Romàn. Thank you for joining us today.
Franco, it's lovely to be here with you.
I'll start off, if you can just tell me a little bit about your training, your dance training to begin with, and what brought you to ballet in the first place.
So I had a dear friend in high school who was a ballerina, and she used to tell me wonderful stories about her training, the performances they would do, and the costumes they would wear. And so I had this desire to try it out just because of her stories. So I started taking jazz, hip hop, and ballet all at the same time in a small studio where I lived. And my first time on stage was being a dancer in the musical Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. I love dancing musicals. I ended up doing a run of about 7 or 8, including West Side Story, Guys and Dolls, Fiddler on the Roof. But it was classical ballet that intrigued me because of its combination of emotion, physicality, and pedagogical study. And so I transitioned completely into the study of specifically just ballet and moved from the small town where I was living to the East Coast of the United States to study at the Nutmeg Conservatory for the Arts, which was a professional ballet training school.
Wonderful, wonderful. What an amazing introduction there. And then you transitioned to the military. When did that happen, and how did your fellow Marines feel about your ballet background?
That's a great question. So I loved dancing, primarily because I had the opportunity to dance some very pivotal ballets when I was in school. Ballets that told important stories that I thought people needed to hear about grief and a family losing their children and going through the grieving process. Anthony Tudor's Dark Elegies, and a ballet choreographed by a mentor of mine that talked about the children in the Dresden concentration camp in Germany and how they kept hope alive during those horrible times. When I started dancing as a professional ballet dancer, I felt that a lot of those stories weren't at the forefront of what we were doing day to day. And I felt the desire to do something where I was part of a greater good or part of something that was helping other people. And so I felt that military service was the way to do that. So I stepped away from a professional ballet career and joined the United States military. I didn't tell my fellow Marines at first that I was a ballet dancer. It wasn't until almost the end of boot camp that some of my fellow Marines found out because they saw some photos that I had in my footlocker. And then the last day of boot camp, I actually walked up to my senior drill instructor, who is the senior person who is in charge of training the new Marines. And I showed him a picture of me dancing Sleeping Beauty in a tunic and tights, partnering a ballerina in a tutu. And I just remember him kind of glaring at me and shaking his head and going, "Oh, Baca, I knew there was something weird about you."
Wow, what an experience that must have been. When you returned, did you struggle and did you return to dance? Was that a help for you?
Yes, so I served in the Iraq War from 05 to 06 in one of the most dangerous places in Iraq at the time, Fallujah. And coming back from war and having the experiences that me and my fellow Marines had, I struggled with anxiety, depression, a bit of kind of a lack of purpose. And it was actually my wife, who's a ballerina, that suggested I go back to dance as a way to reconnect with those around me and use art to kind of soften the blow of the transition from the military to civilian life.
And so on to Exit 12. Through your work with veterans, you work with a lot of men. And how do you encourage the men in particular to join you in the first instance?
I don't know. I tell this to a lot of people, and I again don't know how this narrative is going to read, but a lot of the times our participants we have either worked with for a very long time, or at the very outset, when we were starting this idea of using dance with military veterans, we tricked them. And I say that more for effect, not for reality. The reality is we would invite them to usually engage with us in an artistic practice that we would combine with our dance practice. So if they were writers, if they were musicians, if they were spoken word poets, we would invite them into the studio and we would invite them in the spirit of collaboration. And through that collaboration, we would eventually get to where we would involve them in the movement as well. And that grew into us getting known for helping veterans through movement. And so then when we went to places where we would work with veterans, they would come and know what was involved. Maybe not intimately, but they knew they would have to move. They knew they would have to create. They knew they would have to hopefully, present what they would create in some sense, whether it was an informal showing or a formal on-stage performance with the company. And so we've had some really incredible experiences working with veterans that have gone through our movement workshop, have introduced their military movement, have transformed it into something creative, abstract, and amazing that kind of portrays their story. And then we've been able to put it on stage and share that with audiences.
I assume that when they first come to you, they have very little movement vocabulary beyond their military training. So is it a challenge to develop that vocabulary?
We don't develop a vocabulary with them per se. Like, we're not teaching them ballet. That's not our purpose. Our purpose is to basically reintroduce them to movement, because everyone in the military is a mover. They learn choreography. Military tactics and training are nothing more than a trained way of moving, just like dance. And so what we do is we reintroduce them to movement, and then we introduce the concept of moving in a creative way, and having them reconnect with creativity, imagination, and art in a bodily sense. And it's extremely transformative when an individual gets into the studio and they start working with military movements that they remember from their service or from training. And then we challenge them with different things like turning their name into movement, or taking their military movements and transforming them into a different quality, a different texture, a different dynamic that might be centered on a word or an emotion. And then working with others, moving with others, touching others, lifting, trusting again. It's pretty incredible the things that can be done through movement focused on reconnection with those around you.
That must be amazing to see happen. Is it, do you find it difficult for them to make this transition from their military training?
I think it's difficult for a lot of individuals who have gone through the military, and for a myriad of reasons. Some of it is the military training that's hard to get rid of. Some of it is ways of moving through the world or ways of reconnecting with the world. They're not that, just not, no one's helping them with it. And also, when you're in the military, a lot of things are taken care of for you because you're focused on your mission and you're focused on what you're trained to do. And so a lot of the mundane daily tasks that normal people get accustomed to, or civilians get accustomed to, or accustomed to doing, can be very trying for someone who's getting out of the military. And so if you imagine being pulled out of a social system where the infrastructure is built to support you into a system where you're basically on your own, and you have to not only put into practice some things that you haven't done for a very long time, but there's also a lot of things you might have to learn and unlearn in order to operate in society. And so I think the struggle is real for a lot of individuals that get out of the military, and art is a really good way to soften that transition. Not only dance, but a lot of forms of art and a lot of forms of social endeavors that help people connect.
Yes, that is so true. In 2012, you went back to Iraq. Can you tell me why you wanted to work with the Iraqi youth through dance, and how this impacted them and you?
I had the incredible experience of getting a fellowship where they connected me with a wonderful organization out of New York City called Battery Dance Company that was using movement to connect divergent groups that might not come together and find a way to work together. Their first trial of this was in Germany, working with Israeli and Palestinian youths and bringing them together through dance. And so when I got this fellowship, when I started talking with the artistic director, Jonathan Hollander, he suggested that we go back to Iraq and run one of these dance workshops with Iraqi youth. And for me, it was an opportunity to do good in the country without holding a weapon. So I jumped at the opportunity. It was me and another dancer from New York City that embarked on the journey to northern Iraq. We worked with 30 young people from the cities of Kirkuk and Erbil. And we basically didn't, again, teach them a vocabulary, but rather taught them that through choreography, dance, and movement, they could tell the world things that were important to them, telling the world that they were not unlike the rest of everyone else, that they wanted the same things as people in America, people in Britain, people in Australia, that they just wanted to do something they loved, find a profession that they loved, whether it was art, theater, or a professional career, that they wanted to find someone that they cared about with and settle down and start a family. And the most important thing, that they wanted to feel safe in their community, that they could walk down the streets and do all of this in a community where they didn't have to be afraid that, you know, they would step on a bomb and be blown up, or that ISIS would come and take over their city. It was a pretty incredible experience to be able to connect with people in a country where I served with a weapon, and to be able to go back without a weapon and feel that I had just as much or a bigger impact as an artist.
That is really amazing. That must have been just an incredible experience for you. With your work with veterans, those who have physical changes as a result of war, do you think that dance can play a part in them accepting and working through their changed bodies?
Absolutely. I've seen it. I've absolutely seen it. And I'll give you two examples because I haven't had an opportunity to really dig deep into this question, but I have examples that might illustrate the positives behind your question. we did a workshop in Washington, D.C. with a group of veterans, and we had one veteran who was wheelchair bound and was in a huge motorized wheelchair. And I'll tell you, it was pretty incredible to see not only this amazing female veteran participate in all of the movement activities, tasks, and tools that we gave to them, but also to perform, to move, to feel connected, as if the wheelchair wasn't even there. Another one is we were working in a Veterans Affairs facility in the south of the United States. And we had started the workshop. We had done a warm-up that's probably not unlike warm-ups that many people watching this do. We just did like squats, jumping jacks, something to get the heart rate up. And then we started movement. And we had about 5 veterans already in the room, and we were working with them. And in walks a female veteran who was strapped to a care worker because she had lost or deadened motor functions on the left side of her body. And so she couldn't get around very well for fear of falling and hurting herself. And so they were trying to better the motor functions on the left side of her body by strapping her to an individual and helping her through movement. And this is a testament to the team that I work with. One of my dancers came up to me and said, I'm going to go work with this individual, and peeled off and worked one-on-one with this female veteran. And again, she did everything the rest of the group did. She participated as much, if not more, in every task. And at the end, her care worker shared with us that she noticed an improvement in the left side functioning through the movement workshop, and that it was a definite positive for this individual.
Wow, amazing. In such a short time as well, after, probably doing a lot of therapy and stuff like that. Tell me, where is Exit 12 at now, and what's in the future for you and the company?
We're working on a couple of things. So this is, again, everything Exit 12 does just kind of blows my mind, and I'm the artistic director. This week, we're flying out to a ranch in Santa Fe, New Mexico, to work with a veterans organization called Horses for Heroes. And they're led by a former special operations officer turned chaplain who believes that spirituality, mindfulness, and working with amazing, caring, giving animals like horses can positively impact veterans. And so myself and a couple artists from Exit 12 are headed out to work with this team a little bit to see if we can come up with something creative while we're there, and also work on some sort of partnership down the line to work with a lot of the veterans that they work with. The other thing we're working on is a partnership with the Intrepid Air, Sea, and Space Museum, which is an aircraft carrier here in New York Harbor. It is a weapon of war turned into a weapon of, a weapon of war turned into a place of culture, education, information, and in it being a museum. And their guiding principles are a lot of the things Exit 12 believes in, that we can use this information to embolden the public, inform the public, and give the public tools with which they can make wiser decisions about anything from policy to how they contribute in the world. And what we're proposing is that we do a long workshop with a group of veterans and bring together either refugees or immigrants from war-torn countries, specifically Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, on the Intrepid, and do a movement workshop for a set number of weeks leading up to a public performance on the deck of the Intrepid around the United States Memorial Day weekend of honoring those who have fallen in combat. So a couple of exciting things coming up. We always have something exciting burning on the stove, ready to serve. So those are just a few things that are down the road.
That's amazing. That's really wonderful. I can imagine that when you were in Iraq, you would never have perceived that you would be doing what you're doing today. It's just amazing to hear your story, which has started from ballet, gone into the military, and now touching the hearts and souls of so many people. You're a very inspiring man, Romàn, and I thank you so much for making the time to speak with me today, and can't wait to hear what exciting things you have happening in the future. All the very best, Romàn. Thank you very much.
Well, Franco, thank you for having me, and I am doing nothing more than you and the rest of your team over at the RAD are doing, inspiring people with the art form that we love, and making people believe that they're powerful and that they can be a part of change.